With me today, I'm Julie Cannon. I'm one of the old-timer authors at Bold Strokes Books. And with us, we have D. Jackson Leigh, Camille Spencer, Ursula Klein, Nicole Stiling. Did I pronounce that right, Nicole?
You did.
Stiling?
Yes.
Wonderful. And Spencer Greene. So a brief introduction about all of us, and then we'll get into some of the questions that I have. So Camille grew up in Southern California during the 70s and the 80s, and she was watching Disneyland fireworks off her balcony and ditching school to hit Tower Records and thrift shops on Melrose Avenue. I remember Tower Records. That was a big deal back then. She spent a couple of years as an art major in college and then switched midway to English literature, which led her to an unnatural obsession with Hester Prynne, Lady Brett Ashley, and Henry David Thoreau's lifestyle of resistance. After graduating from that, she packed her car and moved to Burlington, Vermont, sight unseen, living in the land of maple syrup and snowboarding for the next 10 years. And why, Camille, did you do that? Sight unseen.
Oh, I just fell in love with New England when I was reading all the literature out here. And, it's the opposite of California. And it just drew me here.
And that's when you're like young and unencumbered and you can just make a cross-country
Exactly.
move like that.
I could do
Wonderful.
whatever I wanted, no ties. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Right now she lives in Western Massachusetts and she works as a freelance copywriter and an editor. And in 2013, she began writing fiction on the side, like I'm sure all of us did. So moving on to Nicole, she lives in Massachusetts with her wife and a couple of kids. She joined Bold Strokes in 2019 with her novel Secrets in a Small Town. And she's published a total of 4 books with us. And Secrets in a Small Town and Heart of the Storm were both Goldie finalists. Congratulations to you,
Thank you.
Nicole. And she loves reading mystery and horror novels, playing video games, and binge watching TV shows. So what's your latest binge watch, Nicole?
The last thing we watched was Midnight Mass on Netflix.
Midnight Mass?
Yeah, a horror series.
Oh, well, I'll skip that. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Wonderful. Okay. Dee Jackson, also known as Deb, is a retired journalist. She writes lesbian romances ranging from sweet to extra hot, all laced with her Southern humor, with her affection towards dogs and horses. And she's written 17 novels and 1 anthology of short stories, all published by Bold Strokes. And she's won 5 GCLS awards in paranormal, romance, and fantasy categories, and was a finalist for the 2014 Lambda Literary Society Awards. So, Deb, your bookshelf is littered with bookends of awards that you've won.
Fortunately, people seem to like some of the stuff I write. I just write for myself, and then I always wonder if it's any good until, I'm always surprised.
Well, good. Congratulations to you. Next, we have Spencer. Spencer Greene is the author of Stolen Kiss and next month's Never a Bridesmaid. She writes contemporary romance and loves reading and watching queer media of all types. And when she's not writing and working, she makes music and likes riding her bike around Washington, D.C. Welcome, Spencer. And last but not least, in the center of my screen, we have Ursula Klein, and she is the author of Winter's Spell and Enchanted Autumn, and she lives in Wisconsin. And she too likes reading sci-fi and queer romance novels, of course. So welcome everybody. So the first question I have is, who wants to define what is a trope? The first time I heard it years ago, I had no idea what that meant. I actually had to look it up. So who wants to take a stab at the definition of it?
I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me because I'm an English.
I mean, I have it written down right here for the actual definition, but if someone wants to pipe in.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Go for it.
A trope is a storytelling convention, such as the age gap, employee falls in love with boss, uh, um, rich encounters poor, and they fall in love.
Mhm.
It's a storytelling convention.
Right, right. And and that's the difference between a trope and a genre. A genre we know as romance, sci-fi, thriller, murder mystery, contemporary romance, historical romance. Those are genres. And within that genre, there can be tropes. Sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. And Deb said gave an example of several of them. Second chance romance, holiday romance, cowboy romances, age gaps, those kinds of things. So within a genre, you can have a trope. And do you think that um, why do tropes matter in any kind of writing? Spencer, let's start with you. Why do you think they matter to readers?
Um, I am a reader, and so I know why they matter to me and why I write them. And I feel like for me, it's sort of a conversation with the reader you're having, because it's sort of a well-worn, part of the genre that makes, I think, people feel comfortable and makes them uh, you know, they're just like, there's something so perfectly satisfying about a very common and very like perfectly done trope. And so yeah, for me, may have forgotten the question, but I think that I love them, and I think that they work as a way of you almost talking to your reader about the genre in a way, in a
Right.
sort of loving way, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nicole, what are your thoughts about it?
Um, I think they're important because it's a specific interest. People can actually look up what they're interested in.
Mhm.
Some people may not be interested in age gap, but that may be great for others. So I think it narrows down what type of book you want to read in a, gigantic genre.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Spencer or Camille, any?
I think it gives a sense of familiarity, and I think a lot of people are drawn to things that maybe they can relate to, but at the same time, I think they're drawn to like the Cinderella story that they want in real life. So, I definitely gravitate towards certain tropes and stories, just
Mhm.
probably more the Cinderella thing because it's just kind of a sweet ending.
Mm-hmm. And which ones? So you've said the Cinderella trope. Are there any
Well,
others that you?
I like the forced proximity. I put that in a couple of my books, and I like the soulmate sort of destined to be together.
Mhm.
The friends to lovers. I think that's really good, and I think that's really common. I think there's a lot that are um, really sort of queer centric, or because of the closeted nature of our existence and
Mhm.
many years for us. Um, so I think like the secret romance and things like that, when it's not accepted, I think that's a favorite of mine.
Mhm. Mhm. Deb, how about you? What are your thoughts about, why do tropes matter? And do they matter more in romance than they do in any other type of genre, do you think?
I think they do in romance because romance readers are looking for um, the experience. Uh, they want to feel what the characters are feeling, and I think tropes are important for the very reason that the others have cited in a different way. Tropes are real life, and they're also fantasies, and romance readers identify with the real life situations. Having a crush on your boss, um, the or um, they want to live out in that book a fantasy of the Cinderella fantasy, and so I think that's why romance readers are drawn to them.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right. Ursula, Any additional thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would just agree that I think in romance, it's a genre that is very much defined by its tropes, and that it's kind of like what the Western is very similar in the sense that like readers and consumers of those kinds of genres really expect certain kinds of tropes will show up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what's interesting is that I read sci-fi also, and sci-fi it's like kind of the opposite. Like people are that the genre is kind of defined by like there are tropes, but people are more willing to kind of like go out on a limb when they're reading that. But because romance is kind of a comfort genre, it's the one like the Cinderella ending, right? The idea that you're gonna read it to be comforted, to feel good at the end of it. So those tropes have this sense of kind of like familiarity, like sitting in your favorite armchair with your favorite warm drink, and picking up a book, is going to provide you with you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but on the other hand, like you have a sense of familiarity with kind of the ingredients.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about a trope in a sci-fi, I don't read sci-fi. I can't follow it. Sometimes I'm too black and white and I read it and I don't know what the hell's going on. So I can't disappear in something like that. So and I really admire those people who write it, because it's such a world building. You build your own world and you have to keep track of everything. It's like those folks that write mysteries and suspense. So what are a couple of different kind of tropes you find in sci-fi?
I would say the most common one is like kind of like a version of the hero's journey, right? The hero who doesn't know this year he is meant to be a hero because of their background or because they weren't allowed to know who they were. And then they have to kind of they come into, and this happens in fantasy too, they kind of are pushed into this moment of like fame or glory, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the main character is a real underdog. I feel like that's a pretty common trope in a lot of science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's also really common to the genre, which is like the antithesis to romance, is that in sci-fi, readers are like 100% okay with like not understanding what's happening for like even up to like 100 pages. Which I'm like you with that, Julie. I'm like, I can't. Like, I can take a little bit of like, I don't know what's going on, but please explain this to me. But yeah, I really tried with like Harrow the Ninth. I was like, I'm gonna do this. It's like queer fantasy, and I read Gideon the Ninth, and it was confusing, but I got through it. But like Harrow the Ninth, I was like, this is just too confusing. And I'm like halfway through the book, and I still don't understand what's happening. My wife's like, well, how can you not understand it? It's so clear. And I'm like,
So, Spencer, your Secrets in a Small Town. What was that? What was that trope?
That's me.
Oh, Nicole, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're right. I'm sorry.
That was Enemies to Lovers, which is my very favorite.
Okay. And what makes that your favorite?
I love the tension, the banter, being able to go on a journey with the characters where they start out, just not liking each other, and then, ending up in love. I really enjoy that.
So what was the secret in a small town? Don't give it away. But
it was
did we find out about it at the very end or somewhere along in the middle?
it was at the end. There's a bad guy.
Oh,
That's the secret.
There you go. Okay. So Spencer, how about you? Never a Bridesmaid that's coming out. What's that trope?
Yeah, what is the trope? Wow, I wasn't even thinking about that book.
Or is there one? I mean, is there? Well, first of all, does every romance have one, or have to have one, or
yeah,
maybe that's
I think mine are riddled with tropes, but I don't know always, like, for instance, I'm going to say in comparison, like Stolen Kiss, because it dealt with infidelity, I already knew that was going to be a problem. And so it had to be sort of like balanced with a lot of like comfort stuff or a specific, I mean, not exactly comfort. I kind of went more drama, but there were a lot of like single bed situations, or like, sort of like things that could sort of fill in the genre more, since it was skewing it. But with Never a Bridesmaid, I decided to go like way further into like just being pure romance. Yeah, because I feel like it's stressful for people to have complicated takes on it. And I personally like a higher stress skewed book, but I think, people like to be more comfortable. I think it's like where you grew up, maybe like what kind of home you grew up in, maybe. Mine was a little more chaotic, so I like a little more chaos in my books. But yeah, so they both are trope heavy. There's one point in Never Bridesmaid where there is a single bed, and it like is averted. And so like it sort of was like almost done and then like dismissed. And I don't know if that was, yeah, I just was like acknowledged, but no, we're not doing that yet. So
Okay, and Deb, you've written 17 books and a whole bunch of anthologies. So again, similar to my question to Ursula, what is a trope in a paranormal? What's in there? Those I find they're a little easier to read than the science fiction, but still, what are there traditional ones in a paranormal?
Well, the paranormal, the one paranormal book that I wrote was Touch Me Gently, and the trope in there was that one of the main characters had a secret, and that was her paranormal element, and that had to be slowly revealed to the other main character so that she didn't freak out. So that's really a trope, a secret that one of the characters holds. The when I wrote the Dragon Horse trilogy, which was fantasy, the trope there was good versus evil, and which is typical fantasy. I grew up reading Lord of the Rings and the in fantasy like that, the Chronicles of Narnia. So and that's what I love about fantasy. It's almost always a good versus evil, and of course the good wins in the end.
Yeah. Okay. So, question to all of you: do you start with the story, and then the trope, if any, kind of comes with the story, or do you start with that? Start with what the trope is you want it to be, good and evil, age gap, whatever it is to have. Do you start with that idea and then the story comes from it? Camille, we'll start with you.
Yeah, on my first two books, I don't think I was really just kind of writing, and I didn't know where I was going, and I just kind of created it as the story told itself to me. Like it's people say that. But I think the last one, I definitely wanted them to be soulmates, and I wanted it to be like a very nervous sort of, oh my God, you're the best thing in the world. And so I wanted it to be close proximity. So they were forced to kind of face each other and deal with that. So, I mean, I think that's a trope, and I think I led with that for sure in the beginning.
Okay. And how many books do you have with us?
I have 3.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, good. Ursula, how about you? Do you start with the story or start with the trope and then build the story around it?
I definitely start with the story, and then kind of figure out like what trope is going to kind of fit there. It's one of those funny things where like I'll start writing and then I have to fill out like my form, my proposal to Bold Strokes. And I'll be like, what tropes are you including in this? And I'll be like, let's go through the list again. So like with Winter Spell, I knew that I wanted to have Roxy's story from Enchanted Autumn. I wanted her to have a romance. And I knew that I wanted to have a magical creature in there. I wanted to be a mermaid. So, and I wanted to set it in Provincetown. And so then when I was thinking about like her love interest, I chose someone from her past. And so it kind of ended up being a second chance romance. which is definitely one of my favorites. I'm rereading Jane Austen's Persuasion right now, which is also a second chance romance.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite tropes within the genre. So it just ended up kind of working out that like the story I was building up to that like second chance. But now when I think about it, I think there's also an element of like I've sworn off love, like that trope. Like one character is like, I'm not dating anymore. I'm done with this because like my husband broken so many times. And that kind of developed as I developed Roxy's character in Winter Spell. I was thinking about, you know, what's motivating her in the romance and what's her perspective on it. And so that kind of became helpful in thinking about, you know, creating conflict. So I think mostly I start with story, but then eventually like they kind of inform each other.
Yeah, yeah. And like, you know, like you said, Camille, sometimes the trope just comes as the story matures and develops as you write it. Yeah. Spencer, how about you? Which comes first, the chicken or that egg?
Yeah, I might be in the minority. I think trope comes first. I definitely was like, I want to write a second chance romance. I think too, because the first one, you have to develop the character's relationship with the reader in when you don't do that, but with a second chance, you get to sort of already have this history of conflict that sort of creates a different thing. And I kind of wanted to start with more conflict. So I actually was like thinking that that was why my Never Bridesmaid was second chance, because I was like, I want to start there, you know? And so yeah, I mean it definitely is interwoven with the story. They're like it's together, it's not just like any second chance romance. But I definitely think about it like initially, basically.
Yeah. Nicole, how about you?
I do too. I think of the trope that I want to write, and then I kind of build the story around it.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of mine kind of have a defined trope.
Yeah. Okay. And Deb,
Like a meta trope.
oh, what's that, Spencer?
All right, it's like a meta trope. Like then, you know, just, yeah.
Yeah. And then, okay, so this is my trope now. What am I going to write about, and who are they going to be, and what's going to be their conflict, and how do I get them together, and how do I keep them together? And you just kind of, yeah. Deb, how about you? Which comes first in your mind?
I don't ever think of a story in terms of a trope. I usually start out with the characters or an idea to build a storyline around the like one that I haven't yet proposed to Sandy. I've been doing some research on the wild horse herds out west. I've had a fan that emails me routinely and begs for a story about those. So I've been researching this stuff and trying to figure out how I could write a story around that subject. So it's not really there'll probably be a trope in the end somewhere in there, but I never think of I'm going to do this trope and then figure out the characters. For me, the characters always come first.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, and that just goes to show the difference in how everybody writes. So very different. And one size doesn't fit all. If you need to start with something, and that's just what you do. You can't force a specific kind of writing style or a specific kind of thoughts that work themselves out on the page. Yeah. So are there any tropes that are kind of overused and like done with that? Do you think?
I'll go ahead and answer that. I think I don't think there's any that are overused. I think there's some that are badly written. Any trope, I don't care how many times it's been used, if it's written well, it's a good book. It's a trope's not gonna send people to a different book. Only bad writing.
Good point. Yeah. Camille, how about you? What are your thoughts? Are any overused?
I think it's like a personal preference. I think certain people gravitate to certain stories and certain tropes. And I mean, you can really spin things around. One trope, it can be done so many different ways. So I
Mhm.
think that's the exciting part of it is, you know, that this is going to be, you know, say a friends to lovers, but how is that going to be portrayed? I think there's a million different ways you can go. So no.
Well, and you hear the same thing about romance. People, when they poo-poo romance, it's like, well, it's the same old thing. It's the same kind of story. Well, it's not because it's all different. It's what's the spin, who are the characters, what's the problem, what are the challenges, those kind of things. So I see the same thing with tropes. You may have the same one, but how writers approach it will be two very, very different ways.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
voice, even different
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ursula, do you kind of gravitate towards, you said the friends to, were you the one that said friends to lovers? Is the trope that you kind of gravitate to?
No, I think mine was second chances.
Oh, second, okay.
I love that. I love anything that has lots of yearning and like carrying the torch for someone, and when they finally get together and there's just like it's so like magical, right? Like it worked out. And then like, I was on a panel where we talked about like the moment, I forget what it was called, like the moment where everything seems like it feels like everything's all is lost. Like I don't know, I'm kind of a sucker for that too.
Uh-huh.
Just because then it just makes that like coming together at the end just seem so much more passionate and satisfying.
Mhm.
And so and I also enjoy like, yeah, when like they can't be together for some reason. Like, and again, like anything with lots of yearning. And I think like enemies to lovers, I would love to do something with that because again, like there's lots of emotions there. And I think we've all kind of misjudged someone when we first met them and then had to like revise our feelings about them
Mhm.
later on. So I feel like that's very true to life. So I don't know if there's any that I don't necessarily really like dislike. I mean, I don't know. The only one that I'm a little bit like kind of on the fence on is the fake relationship, just because I don't feel like it ever really happens in real life. But I guess
Mhm.
like, I don't know. I mean, romance always has an element of fantasy in it, so
Yeah, for sure. Mhm.
maybe it's
Nicole?
really
Yeah. Mhm. Nicole?
Um, what was the question?
Are there any tropes that that are kind of passé? I mean, they're done with, you think they've been used too much. And then there was like a second question in there of, and you were the friends to lovers trope, right?
No, I was enemies to lovers.
Enemies to lovers. Okay.
Yes.
Friends. Enemy. Okay. And so so first of all, are there any that you think are overused? And second of all, why do you like that one so much?
I don't know if I'd say there's any that are overused. Kind of like everyone else, it's a personal preference thing, and it's about good writing. The only thing I think maybe overdone a little bit is the obligatory breakup towards the end of the book, where everything goes up in flames and then they have to fix it.
Mhm.
I think there's probably other ways of doing it besides that. But again, if it's written well, then it doesn't matter.
Mhm. Mhm.
I tend to go for enemies to lovers. I also love second chance, just like Ursula said. It's all about the yearning. That's my favorite thing to read and write.
Mhm.
The only one that and again, I don't dislike it, I just don't usually seek it out, is friends to lovers.
Mhm.
I feel like there's a weird blurred line of, like, are we more like sisters, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So, something that both Nicole, you and Ursula said was that yearning. How, and it's not really a trope thing, it's just a question. How do you get that on the page so that, whoever reads it feels what you're feeling? Not thinking, but what you're feeling. What do you have to do to get that on the page to come across that way?
I think it's really seeing it through the character's eyes,
Mhm.
what they're looking at and yearning for, whether it's, how they felt in the past toward that person, or what they think they could have with them.
Mhm.
It just the angst of it.
Yeah.
It's it can be tough to write. It can, but you know, when it clicks, it clicks.
Mhm. Ursula, how about you?
Sorry, can you say the question again?
How do you, so you mentioned several times about the yearning,
Oh, yes.
and so how do you get that across in the, you know, as you're typing, so that people, when they read it, they're like right at the edge of their seats?
Such a good question. I ask myself that all the time.
Like, I don't know, it just works, it just happens.
I think it's about making sure that your reader is really getting into the character's head. So as a writer, I'm really giving them like a really good insight into their thoughts and feelings. And as a one, now that this is my second book, and you know, I read a lot more as a writer now. And so when I see other authors doing it really well, I kind of like take mental notes, like, okay, it's really about making sure that like we really know what the character is feeling in a given situation. And that when they're interacting with this other person, whether it's through text messages or written letters or on the phone or in person, that there is a sense of what they're feeling, but there's also like this physicality that goes along with it. And so I really try to like make it really clear that like maybe the person's hands are trembling, or maybe like their heart is racing. You know, kind of having that sense of like the reader can feel that embodied sense of wanting that touch, of wanting to be with that person, but not being able to, for whatever reason, right? Whether it's an outside challenge or an internal hurdle, that there's still that sense of desire that's like coursing through the character's body. And some writers are just so good at coming up with like really original ways of describing that. And so I'm working on that. That's something I'm working on, so that I don't reuse those tired tropes of like, you know, heart aflutter all the time.
You know, there are some really good words and really good phrases, but you know, too much of a good thing is too much. Yeah. Yeah. Deb, in your beginning writings, did you know, do what Ursula said and just kind of read other people and see how they put things together and how they used a trope to advance the story possibly, or shape the story in and of itself?
I still read. I know a lot of writers who don't, but I read extensively, especially within our genre, because I want to see what other people are doing. I've learned a lot from reading some of the foremost authors in our genre, and also Nora Roberts, fantastic romance writer, not in our genre, but she's in romance, but in heterosexual romance. Some of the tools, some of the phrases that she uses, I make mental notes, and so, you know, I have to echo what Ursula said, was that I'd made a note to mention that I think that reading other people will always make you a better writer, and the best writers are also readers. But the thing, I'll tell you, the thing that I struggle with, and I'm interested to find out what the others feel about this. I struggle with the backstory, you know, because every character has to have some kind of flaw, some kind of, you know, something, a dead lover in their past, a bad childhood, you know, something that damages them, that puts them on their personal journey they have to overcome. And it seems like there's just so many tragic things that can happen to people, you know. And so I struggle sometimes to come up with a backstory for my character. Does anybody else have that problem?
I do, yes.
Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yes, I do. You know, you don't want to reuse the same ones over and over again, and you don't want the past to be so tragic that it's, you know, it brings the book down, and yeah, it's definitely a fine line.
feel like I've written few enough books where I have like 17 backstories ready, and then after that, I'll have nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like for next 5 books, I got some backstories, and then I'm done. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, after so many books, like what are my characters' names and where do they
Yeah.
live and what's their history and what's their back history, and Deb, I kind of do this. I kind of struggle with it as well. And what I've done like this couple of times around was it doesn't have to be tragic. It just happens to be their backstory. So it doesn't mean they had a terrible father. Their father was just, maybe not emotional. It wasn't abusive, but wasn't emotional. Or, because if you look back on all of our lives, if there's a lot of things that made us who we are today. And then how do we, whether good or bad. And so how do we take those things and turn it into a backstory for a character, whether it's, you were in the marching band at school, or you got teased, or you didn't get teased, or, whatever it happens to be. So I kind of stopped focusing on the tragedy of the backstory. And I know I'm zeroing in on that one word that you said. But just thinking about myself and my friends and my wife and my kids, what is it about their lives that made them who they are and think the way that they are and act the way that they are? So that's kind of how I helped myself get out of it.
Well, I'm terrifically impressed with 17 backstories, Spencer.
Different characters. That could be like 2 books, you know? That could be for all my secondary characters too.
Yeah.
In my latest book, I actually didn't, I gave them both just regular old backstories, like
Yeah.
fine parents, fine everything. And I figured I'll just go with that this time.
Well, and that in and of itself could be a challenge because they lived in
Right.
this Pollyanna world and their other main character grew up on the streets. So therein, in fact, is some of the conflict with it. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So do you have, I know we're veering off topic a little bit, but when you write sci-fi or fantasy, do backstories come into play as much as they do in romance? Ursula? Yeah, you're nodding your head.
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess my books are kind of paranormal romances. They involve magic. And I love reading that kind of intersection of writing, like fantasy romance or fantasy adventure romance or paranormal adventure romance. And I think you absolutely have to have that backstory because you have to know at all times, and this is true of all genres, you have to know what's motivating the characters that behave in a certain way. It's like it's the only reason those Marvel movies even work, right? Like because every character is a character, right?
Right.
And otherwise it would just be, paper cutouts, right? They wouldn't feel very three-dimensional, right? You understand like why is this person escaping their planet? Or like in Winter Spell, right? Like there's this whole story with the mermaid. And you have to kind of like understand, like, is she happy to be on land? Why or why not? Why does she want to return to the water? Is it just because she's a mermaid, or is there something waiting for her there? And so even when you have like a character who is not of our world, I think for it to work, they have to have some kind of backstory, even if it's just very basic. And what was kind of fun about Winter Spell for me was that sort of secondary storyline with like the mermaid, and then like there were some characters in Provincetown who ended up becoming connected. Like they ended up having a shared backstory that I didn't anticipate when I first started the book. And it just kind of came together in that second half of the book. And I was like, this has to happen. Of course it does. It all connected. And so it was a lot of fun as a writer to kind of have my characters surprise me in a really lovely way that had to do with that backstory.
So can a trope become a cliche? Camille, what do you think?
I again think it's how it's written. I think if it's well written, I don't think so, because like I put so many twists and turns and complications into my books. Like And I think every author comes with a different background and a different writing style and a different vision of their book. So even if it is like a standard sort of cliche story, I think you can add so many different dimensions to it to make it very different.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Spencer, how about you? Do you think tropes can be cliched or can be, used as a cliche?
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe cliche is not the word, but I think back to kind of your question about whether or not there are some that maybe I don't personally like. It's not necessarily because they're cliche, but I do have one that I don't like, and it goes with the one I do like. And I guess it's kind of cliche, but I'm not sure. I like chosen family tropes, right? Like I like that, especially in queer genre. I think we all are like healing from stuff, and I think that that's really great, and it like happens, and it's wonderful. But then there's like this one trope where it's like this like ex-girlfriend who's like very like sexy and like very like awful comes, and she like reseduces the person or is like the worst human that's ever lived, and it's like someone's ex. And like I get it for the drama, but I also feel sometimes like that cliches like doesn't work as well in queer writing, because I feel like they also have a story that's sort of complicated, and I feel like that person would just be a little more dynamic and not so one-dimensional. And so that's something I actually really care about. So like when there are like secondary characters who are kind of there to thwart our main people, I kind of try and make sure that they have a little more dimension, especially when they're part of the family.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing that I think I don't enjoy, or
Do you
sometimes
think?
I do, but not usually.
Yeah, yeah. So what about, can tropes be harmful? Deb, what do you think? Can they be harmful to us, our community, stereotypes? Can they?
Um, I don't know that they can. I think sometimes tropes, like we mentioned earlier, give variety, sort of give a direction for people that want to read a certain kind. Like I tend to the last one I pick up is going to be one about Hollywood stars, but the first one I might pick up is about where one of the main characters is a house rehabber, or something like that, because that's what interests me. Or uh, one about mountain climbing, a romance set where they're mountain climbing, things like that, adventure things I like a lot. And so I don't think they can be bad. And I don't think tropes are only in romance. The big romance sells billions, while other genres sell millions. And we still have that over them, and they can say that we're routine and stereotypical and nothing but tropes all they want to. But what's a mystery? It's a bunch of clues, and then it gets solved, and you find out that the mystery's over. Mystery
Mhm.
is maybe romance. Romance is always going to end up, or should end up, happily ever after. But a mystery is always going to end up being solved in the end. So how could you say one is one's tropish and the other one's not?
Mhm.
I
Right.
just don't buy that. I think there's a huge variety in romances, and a big selection now for our readers of romance and sci-fi, romance and fantasy, romances and mysteries. Where I think we offer a lot, and I just don't agree with that tropes can be there's the end of the only one that that I find I don't really like to read ones where somebody's taken a classic and then taken that plot and written it in more modern day, because to me that's kind of not original enough. And
Mhm.
and I don't mean just the idea, but almost following the the like say uh, female character dresses up, female twin dresses like her brother to fill in for him and you know, and ends up wooing away his love, and that just to me it feels a little bit like cheating.
Mhm, mhm. Camille, how about you? Do you think any tropes can be harmful?
I think if they're done in a bad way, they can, like fixing the broken person. I think it kind of can encourage unhealthy relationships. And especially in like straight romances, I mean, the idea that, you know, there's like almost a rape aspect to it is, I think, very dangerous. But you know, I think definitely, I mean, not everybody is perfect and we all have our issues and we come with baggage. So, I mean, not all fixing the broken person. I think if it's right, but I think some go a little too far to be unhealthy.
Yeah, right. I agree. You know, do they further stereotype in a negative way something or somebody or some situation? I think that's not, you're right, that's not healthy. So
Yeah.
we did have one question. A question has come in on the Q&A. Do you all read other authors' books for leisure and enjoyment, or are you dissecting them from the purpose of learning? Or are you dissecting them and saying this is bad and this is why and this is poor grammar? Or so when you read, can you just read for enjoyment? Nicole, let's start with you.
I plan to read for enjoyment, but I've noticed since I've been writing, it's a little difficult to separate the reader from the writer. I think it's both. I'm reading because I enjoy it, and I'm also learning, and sometimes I'm dissecting it, and sometimes, you know, I pick up on things that I probably wouldn't have before I had an editor. You know, head hopping and things like that. I don't think I thought much of it when I was, you know, just a naive little reader, but now I notice it a lot.
Yeah, and there's a lot out there. Yeah, Spencer, how about you? Do you read for enjoyment?
I do. If I love a book, then I'm not thinking about the notes and things till after. Maybe I might be like, oh, I wish I could do that or whatever. But during it, yeah, if I love it, I'm not. If I am, then I have a big red pen out. So yeah.
Ursula, how about you?
So I think, yeah, I would say it's kind of a mixture. If something is really good and I'm reading something and enjoying it, then I'm really like, you know, I'm kind of like as a writer being like, okay, what about this is so good, right? And I have to say I've gotten pickier as I get into my middle age. And if like something, if I don't like something, I really won't stick with it. I'll just set it down and be like, I'm not gonna read that because it's bad. And maybe I'll realize now with like, because of my editor's comments, like why it is bad, right? But occasionally I will pick up something that is like super, super popular and I'll read it, hoping that it will be for pleasure, but also that I'll learn something from it. And sometimes it's kind of disappointing because you'll read something that's like really, really popular and be like, this is so bad. Like, I'm really disappointed that this is like so popular because it's so bad. Like there's head hopping, they're using the same word twice in one sentence on many pages. I'm like, where's the effort? Like, what happened? I just get mad. There's been a couple of those that I have finished all the way through just to be like, okay, what happened with this? So it is educational. So, but in the best of all possible worlds, it's both. But I'm enjoying it and I'm learning.
Well, and that's one of the things that we as bold stroke authors learn from our editors are those things. And you know, from what you know, one of the common phrases is a bad book is just bad editing, because you know you can even if it's a bad story, a good editor will either trash the whole thing or will make it a good story. But that's the thing. It's poor editing, or if any editing. So Camille, what do you think? Can you read for pleasure, or do you kind of dissect it a little bit?
Yeah, I'm with Ursula. It's kind of a mix. Like I'll get something and I'll just be in awe of like, wow, how did they do that? It's just amazing, especially with the angst and talking about, you know, how do you integrate angst into a story? And, like Sarah Waters does it so well with her, romance and stuff. It's like, how can I write that good? But like, then it gets, you get intimidated and you can't write a word after that. But, I try to read for pleasure, but yeah, once in a while, something just grabs me and it's like, that is really well done,
Yeah.
see what they're
Yeah.
doing.
Mhm. Okay, and Deb, we will wrap it up with you. Do you, I know you probably read for pleasure. You mentioned Nora Roberts, and I love her J.D. Robb series.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you able to read more for pleasure than?
I read only for pleasure, and I never sit down and read thinking I want to learn something from this, unless it's a Nora Roberts book, because I don't usually read heterosexual romance that much. But unless it's the J.D. Robb series, I like those. But sometimes I'll be writing, or I start to write a character, and I'm not sure how to do it. Like, I'll give you an example. I was writing a character that kind of got around and slept with a lot of people, and had slept in the past as one of the main characters, and but I still wanted people to like her because she was like a best friend, and I thought, well, how can I do this? How can I write that she sleeps around and not, make people kind of think of her as their hoe. So I went back and looked and I thought about it, and I remembered in Radcliffe's Provincetown series, there was a character, Allie, who, I mean, she slept with a lot of people, and and she almost slept with one of the main characters, Bree, that we love, and we didn't want to. We didn't want her to cheat, and so how do we still like her? And so I went and looked at how Brad wrote that character, and to get an idea to see some of the wording she used and the things, some ploys she used. So it's the only time that, and when I had struggled some. I like to study her love scenes, because when she first started writing her early books, her love scenes are very graphic. But then, especially in her honor series, as they go along, her love scenes became less graphic and more emotional. And so I studied that. But other than that, at any given time, I'm listening to an audiobook while I'm cleaning house or doing things, working in the yard. I read a different book on my Kindle before I go to bed. And I might also I'm probably also writing my own book at the same time. So I'm not much of a TV watcher. I'm just a voracious consumer of books.
Great. Okay, real quickly, we have just a couple of minutes left. I'll go around the horn. What are you working on, and what are you working on next, and when will it be out? So I will start with Camille.
Mine, I'm working on a novel. It's going to be a while. I'm doing it in my spare time, and I'm doing it just for enjoyment. So, it's probably going to be a, second chance romance.
Great. Ursula.
Well, Winter Spell is out right now. And so I'm working on promoting it as much as I can. And I'm due with baby number 2 in just under a month. So it's kind of like a big project right now. I do have a little seed of an idea for a contemporary romance, though, that would involve a lot of travel to exotic and beautiful locations, because I love to travel. And having kids means that you can't travel as easily. So this might be kind of like a nice way for me to travel in my mind. So yeah, it's just a seed of an idea that I'm starting to develop and working on.
Great. Deb, how about you?
I have a book that comes out next month, When Tomorrow Comes, and it's about 2 characters that have their own handicaps. One is severely ADHD. I have a niece who is, and she struggles with daily life, and the other is a high functioning autistic. And even though their symptoms seem very opposite, actually the treatment, the things that can help them with their struggles, are very similar, and so they end up coming together and ended up being each other's support. So it was a hard story to write, but it was fun in the end. And I think I had good examples that I built on and good research, and I think I did a pretty good job with it. And right now that comes out next month. Right now I'm writing a story for this coming Christmas called Unwrapped.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
So, and I'll just leave that one with you.
Nicole, how about you? We've got 3 minutes left. Actually, we're
well,
about 4 minutes over late, but go ahead, Nicole. What are you working on next?
My new book, The Rewind, comes out in February.
Mhm.
And right now I'm working on nothing.
Oh, and that's okay too. Spencer, how about you?
Never a Bridesmaid, Second Chance comes out in February, and it takes place in the course of someone else's wedding.
Mhm. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. Thank you all for spending your Sunday morning or afternoon with all of us. And y'all have a great time. Thank you.